Hello, everyone. We are now live coast to coast for a national conversation for law firms about COVID-19. It's great to see so many of you from so many different areas around the country joining us today in an effort to share some real-time advice to help law firms survive and manage this crisis. I'm Doug Cardinelli, an account executive here at Firmidable and the moderator for today's presentation. You will not be able to see me, but I'm available for technical support throughout the webcast. Please use the chat section and I will communicate with you privately. Before I turn it over to our panelists today, I'd like to let you know how to participate in today's webinar. First, this webinar will be recorded, so you will receive a follow-up email within 48 hours with a link to view the recording. Secondly, you can submit text questions or comments throughout the presentation by typing into the Q&A panel on the bottom of your Zoom interface. You may send in your questions anytime. As moderator, I'll decide whether to inject into the conversation or save it for the Q&A session in the final segment of today's presentation. We call this a national conversation because we are hoping you will participate and not just observe. Okay, I would like to now introduce Nathan Chapman, president of Firmidable, a strategy-driven advertising and digital agency that works exclusively with law firms. Nathan, who has an MBA in marketing, has 30 years experience helping law firms all over the country meet their growth goals. We'd also like to welcome our partners on this webcast, law firm management coach, strategist, and CPA Tim Mackey, and Vista operations consultant Amanda Hankins. As the top consulting team in the legal industry, Vista strives to transform and elevate law firms through thoughtful analysis, industry know-how, and lasting support, particularly in the areas of operations and profitability. And with that, I would like to now turn it over to Nathan. It's all yours.
All right, thank you, Doug, and we're excited about today. Have very high attendance, so this is clearly a topic that everybody's interested in, and for good reason. So let's start with our conversation for law firms about COVID-19. We're going to provide some information, some strategies, and hopefully have time for good Q&A. So to kind of get us started, we thought, let's figure out what it is now. So at the beginning of this week, we did a survey, and I'm going to take you through that. But it's like the politicians are always telling you that a survey in an election is a snapshot in time. Very true here. I suspect possibly some things have changed already now by the end of the week. And if we do it a month from now, I expect things will be changed again. But anyway, at least at the beginning of the week, this is where we were. First, let's start with what kind of firms participated in our survey. We primarily targeted toward plaintiffs. We just felt like the issues of full service firms and defense firms were different. So we particularly targeted our invitations to plaintiffs firms. So you might notice over here, there's 19% that are other. Like, what is that? Actually, every single one of those we went and looked was a Social Security disability firm. So those are we could call those plaintiffs also. So pretty much every firm here is representing individuals, not corporations. We had a nice diversity of states, 31 in total. Little spike from Texas, but overall, I think we're kind of spread out throughout the country. What age? Our list was primarily principals and management, maybe in charge of marketing growth for the firm. So it makes sense to me. We're skewed a little bit on the middle to older side, but you know, we've got a range, as you can see. The size of your firm. So our audience today and in the survey, primarily smaller firms like 0 to 9 attorneys. The number of attorneys were in the teens, just a little bit in the 20s, and then no firms bigger than that. You know, also plaintiffs firms tend to be on the smaller size in terms of number of attorneys. But anyway, that's our audience today. And we wanted to know, what are they doing now? So as of the time of the survey, 26 of the firms were already working virtually. 46%, about half, were working partially virtually and sometimes in shifts, trying to do other things that could, minimize the personal contact. However, let me show you this over here. 12% said other. When we went and looked through those, most of the time it was somebody like, we're working in the office, but we blocked the doors. We're not having contact with our clients. So we might be able to put those in the category of partially virtually, and then only about 16% were making no changes at all at this time. How do you think this virus is going to impact you, positively or negatively? 1 meant the most severe negative, 10 meant the most positive as possible. You can see, if we could consider 5 as kind of our midway point, we are skewing some toward the more negative side. But there's, interestingly, some people who think this might be a positive, including some people are like 10 out of 10, right? So when we averaged it, it came out to an average of 4.42, just slightly below the midway point. One of the reasons that might be contributing to this, there's actually 5 categories, 6 through 10 above 5, and 1 through 4 below. We decided also to round it a little bit. So there's a big difference, I think, between whether somebody said 4 slightly negative concerns versus whether they said 1, where they're, scared what. So anyway, if we group it that way, and then we said the most negative concerned people are 1 through 3, then we got about 39%. If we said modest change, little to no change, these 3 middle ones, since about 42% of the poll audience, and then the very positive 7 through 10 would be about 19%. For the short term, now in a minute we're going to talk about advertising and things like that. But other than that, are you cutting payroll just a few percent, maybe about 4%? A couple of people actually increasing payroll, I guess, to staff up. Are you cutting expenses other than payroll? A little over 20%. Increasing expenses, not too bad. 71% overwhelmingly people, at least for now, let's just wait and see how this goes. They're not anticipating cutting anything there. We asked people to name their top 3 concerns, and we decided to pool these together. So we didn't think it mattered too much whether it's 1, 2, or 3, but what categories did people name as their top 3 concerns? The number 1 was that a slowdown in the legal system itself. Secondly would be cash flow. Maybe that you make your money over the long haul, but it just may take longer to get it. You might get squeezed there. Thirdly, the client's ability to see healthcare providers. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. Number 4, sick employees or the attorneys themselves. We're down to number 5 before, but 43% significant before there's a real concern about actual loss in revenue. Much smaller, 14%, the attorney's ability to work efficiently. Are you planning to refine your marketing message during the pandemic? 46% already said they have. And another 16% said they plan to in the future. 16% say they don't plan to make any changes, and 22% haven't made up their mind or they're still figuring out what to do. Okay, during the pandemic, in terms of your advertising, your marketing, what are you planning to do? By far, at least as of this snapshot in time, overwhelmingly 70% say steady as she goes. Those who are planning on making a change kind of split equally between increasing or decreasing. I definitely have talked to some firms where they're saying there's some opportunity here, and they're actually, running additional ads, either digital or traditional. It took us a minute to figure out what was none of the above, increase, decrease, or the same, what is left. This might be people who think they don't advertise at all, but maybe they just have a website. That's kind of what I guess those people are. All right, let me ask our panelists, before we start talking about some ideas and recommendations we might have, what are your impressions of that poll?
I'll take a shot at this first and then turn it over to Amanda. I think all of that is very interesting, and it's interesting to me that a lot of people are kind of taking a wait and see attitude, which I happen to agree with, but for something we'll talk about toward the end of this webinar, which is the potential for getting government loans, and we'll hit on that later. But kind of a wait and see attitude in regard to spending, but certainly looking at changing the way they do things, working from home, maintaining social distancing and those kind of things, which we all, or at least I believe we all agree that that's important to for everyone's health. Not forget about the business side of that, but working differently, I think, is what we will see into the future. Vista has been a little bit, we're a little bit unique in that working remotely is not, was not anything new to our consultants, and Amanda's going to hit on a lot of that in just a few minutes. But we've been in business for 10 years, been in over 150 law firms, and all of our consultants work from home. We don't have a general office where everyone meets. They're situated all over the country. So we've had to develop over time, ways to maintain efficiency and effectiveness in our business, but also develop a kind of a unique culture, being that we're all separated a little bit. So well, I think we're uniquely situated because we simply have been doing it. So that's what Amanda's going to share a lot of, I think, as we go through. And, we're excited to be here, and hopefully we can share some knowledge. When we get to the end and we start talking about some details of loan packages and things like that, you'll probably hear me say a lot, this is what we think, because we're unsure about how some of these things are going to roll out. But with that, I'd like to kind of turn it over to Amanda, who's going to talk about just how to work from home, some of the techniques and things that she's experienced and seen with some of our clients in the last couple of weeks even. So Amanda?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me. So today we want to talk about technology and just different issues that you all may be experiencing. And as Tim indicated, I've been working remotely for the last 5 years. It is different even for me right now, since I have 3 teenagers at home that aren't normally here in April. So we're just on the summer mode. Folks know that they have to respect my space, and that whenever I'm working, that they tend to try to leave me alone. So even for myself, who is familiar with working from home, I've had some technology issues myself. So as your team members are learning to work from home, I think that you need to remember that we need to give everyone some grace and some time over the next few weeks. You may think it's second nature to just run home and plug up your computer or log into your laptop and know how to use those features. So just be patient with your team members. Some of the notes that I had wrote down were as simple as, if your team members were used to having dual monitors and maybe now they're home and they're working off of a laptop, I can tell you that the efficiency and effectiveness is going to very much decrease if that is the environment that they're having to use now. So just keep that in mind. As the crisis goes on, I think more and more folks may end up having some of their team members maybe even coming into the office to bring some of those tools home with them to try to help set up their workspace even better for them at home. But hopefully this isn't going to be a long-term situation that we're dealing with. Other issues that we've seen our clients dealing with are, if you had VoIP phones, what does that look like when your folks take those phones home with them? Are they capable of plugging that into a router so we can make sure that we're tracking phone calls? Some of the clients that I have that were not fortunate enough to have those phone systems in place when this crisis happened, they were down to using Google Voice to call their clients, or even as old school as this sounds, they were using *67 on their own cell phones to block their phone numbers whenever they were calling clients. So just, there are definitely ways around this. We just have to be open-minded. Video conferencing. So video conferencing, even though we have worked from home for all of these years, Vista hasn't done much video conferencing. I tended to use my free conference call phone number, and we just talked on the phone. Why we never took advantage of Zoom, I'm not sure. Maybe it's just because I didn't want to put makeup on and do my hair all the time, so my clients had to see me. But now Zoom has become part of our everyday life. Even Vista, if you would have asked us back in January, we had our own planning session, and we plan to make sure that we at least all talk on the phone quarterly. But now Vista, we are meeting via Zoom every Monday while this crisis is going on, so we can knowledge share amongst our team. And we'll talk about communication a little bit later. So keeping that in mind, if you're a Zoom user, or there's Uber Conference, there are lots of different software programs out there, and just make sure that you're safe when you're using those. I know you've probably seen some of the announcements about people Zoom bombing. So just make sure that you are setting all of your preferences to where if you are putting something out like we have done today, that if it's public, that no one from another country can hijack your Zoom meeting.
And what we mean by that, you know, the Zoom deal with people hijacking it, I think it's as simple as entering a password for your team to get into the conference. That sounds very simplistic, but that's my understanding. Amanda, is there anything any different than that, or you think that actually does it?
I think it's mainly for like what we're doing right now. It is whenever you're putting something out into the public. If you're just emailing your own team, it's more about that link getting out into the cyber world and people being able to grab a hold of that link. So, and I guess it could happen though if people are hijacking emails and things like that. So I think when we do our own personal in office, whether you're using Microsoft Teams or Zoom or any type of Uber conference, things like that, I think it's a little bit better. It's just more of when we're putting that out to the public.
Gotcha.
And the other thing I didn't touch on with, it's not necessarily a computer or phone issue, but things to think about is just making sure that, you know, what are you going to do as far as mail and faxing and scanning and all those things. And I think it is interesting some of the results that we had, because this is a nationwide conversation right now. So if you talk to someone in Montana, they're probably not as concerned as someone that's in New York State. So the great thing that we have with Vista is we have clients from coast to coast. So I live in Kentucky, so our governor has been more proactive about some things. So I've been able to talk to some of my clients that are in other states that maybe they haven't locked down as much to give them that information. But things to make sure that you're thinking about that, you know, it's not necessarily an issue, but how are you going to scan documents, print documents, things like that. And we've got lots of different companies that with our research that we have found that can help you all. One of the companies that we have found in the last few weeks is called EarthClassMail. So EarthClassMail has a system set up to where you can actually have your mail forwarded to them, and they will scan your mail in, open your mail. They even have a way to deposit checks. I found out yesterday that one of our friends in the marketing world actually helped us even set up a 10% discount code. If you choose to use EarthClassMail and you use the coupon code VISTA, it'll give you 10% off for a little while. So very cool service. So I want to make sure I threw that in there. Last thing I know I want to touch on electronic contracts. I told Tim that this is going to hopefully make my conversation with firm owners a lot easier in the coming months. One of the first things we talk to firms about when we come in for an assessment is we talk to them about how are you signing your cases up. And a lot of firms are still not using electronic contracts. They still feel like that they need that personal touch of an investigator or an attorney going to the client's home or the hospital. And where I would say, yes, there are some situations, there are some accidents that do warrant a face-to-face conversation. But even still, we try to encourage our clients to use electronic contracts, and then you can still send an investigator out afterwards. So just making sure, and if you, I know at the end, you're going to see our email addresses and things like that. So if you are a firm out there and you don't have a lot of information about different electronic contract services like DocuSign or AssureSign, feel free to give me an email, and I'll try to set up a time to talk to you about those, the pros and cons that we're seeing from some of them. I know DocuSign is integrated into some different case management softwares, but you know, they don't have as many features, in my opinion, as some of the other electronic contract companies that are out there. So shoot me an email and we can set up a time to talk about some of that stuff.
I wanted to also say that if you're not using live chat now on your website, I think we need to be able to communicate with people however they want to communicate with us. I'm not going to do a deep dive on that today, but I have a whole blog post on it that I can send you if you're not yet using live chat. And I wanted to touch on call centers. In fact, I have a whole recorded webcast on that I could send you. I think call centers ought to be considered just in general. It's really hard a lot of times for your team to keep up with things, and sometimes things aren't as smooth and as fast as you think they are. Plus a call center is 24/7, whereas your in-house team probably goes home at night. But especially at this time, if you're feeling like you're not being as efficient, this is maybe something you ought to consider. I've mentioned that to a couple of firms and they said, oh, we don't want any more expenses right now. So I can appreciate that, but just keep an eye on things. You know, it's possible if you're not being as efficient with your intakes, you might lose more than that cost would be. So something to keep your eye on.
That too, Nathan, really quick. So back on live chats, if you have never used live chat before, if you are going to start that, just make sure someone is monitoring that for you. The worst thing you can do is have it on and no one is monitoring that. So if it is a new procedure for your intake department, just make sure that that's lined out for them. And the other note that I had wrote down about call centers, and I've seen this a little bit with some of our clients, they are seeing a huge uptick as well. And they may not, just like Zoom and some of the other programs, they had this overnight uptick in team members that they needed to help their companies. So just make sure that you're still listening to call recordings if you have that capability, not only of your team members, but also your after hours service. And because that's the last thing that we need. One of my firms has even sent all of their calls to their call center for right now. So just want to just make sure that they are squeezed tight right now too, with so many people that maybe even never used their service before. So just make sure that you're monitoring that for your firm, that they're getting the quality that you want your clients to hear.
I 100% agree. I'm going to piggyback a little bit on the live chat again. Most of Vista's clients that use live chat, and I would say they're 99% of them, they measure the response time in seconds. So someone is absolutely monitoring that live chat. And now during this pandemic, the time that probably the law firm's phone is not ringing as much as it was before, it's imperative to actually convert those clients who call you and say, we need something, to a client, that you don't miss them. So, you know, Vista, we hammer a lot on there's only two ways to grow a law firm, which is to get more clients and then increase the value of their resolutions. It's a fairly simple concept, but there's a lot of subsets that go along with that. So the live chat is just one more little component that can hopefully help you increase your conversion rate of clients that are calling. If they're calling you now, we actually have some clients who have talked about widening their net. And what I mean by that, if they're very selective in the type of clients that they want, or they were that way before the pandemic crisis hit, they are considering widening that net. If they get a call, and if it's something, hey, we may or may not have taken that before, they're falling on the side of actually signing that up, and then, you know, shaking it out as it goes through the pipeline. And I'll say,
we could talk about intake all day long. We could have a whole 2-hour section on how to handle your intakes right now, for sure.
Absolutely. So we'll jump on over to the human touch and more the culture components.
So for this slide, this really hits home for me. I know if you are my client or ever been my client before, one of the things I talk about all the time is communication. Communication with your clients, communication with your team, communication from attorneys to paralegals, case managers, those kind of things. So this is something that is just elevated even more. If you weren't communicating with your team on a regular basis, now is the time to start. I challenge you by Monday to figure out a way for all of your team members to get on a Zoom meeting and talk to them. Give them some type of reassurance of how you're handling things as a business. Because I promise you, if you are not communicating with them, they are making up stories about what is happening. We call it at my house the rumor weed. So even though they may not be in an office setting together, I promise you they're texting and emailing one another and wanting to know if, you know, we're all getting canned or what's happening with our firm. So the best thing that you can do is get ahead of that. Make sure that if you did already have huddles and things like that, it's just like you were in the office. Don't stop what you are already doing. That can mean weekly huddles. Some of our firms even do daily huddles. So if you are doing those things, please don't stop. But if you are not, I challenge you to do that by Monday. Your leadership meeting, if that isn't something that you did on a regular basis, make sure that the leaders of your firm, however that looks, if it's managers or if it's even just high level senior paralegals, wherever that communication looks like, make sure that you are talking to them, depending on the size of your firm. Make sure you're getting that communication. So even though you might have a weekly huddle that has all 70 of your team members on that Zoom meeting, make sure that your leadership team is then having those face-to-face interactions with their team members to make sure that we continue with the pipeline. We don't want anything to get clogged up, so we want to talk, more about the in the weeds stuff with them. Wind Down Wednesday. I think that these are great ideas. I ripped off and duplicated, which is what a lot of what Vista does. I saw the idea on Facebook, and I decided a few weeks ago that I wanted to set up a Wind Down Wednesday. I sent an invite to several managing attorneys or COOs of firms that Vista is affiliated with. So the Vista team members and a few other people jumped on, and after hours, we just all sat around and we talked. We didn't talk about business. We talked about our kids and what was going on and how we're dealing with these things and how much I can't wait to go back to Target, those kind of conversations. So make sure that it's not always just about business. If you had a great culture before, you've got to make sure that you continue to snowball with that, and that even though we can't be in the office face-to-face, that you're still communicating with them. And one of the ideas that I had, and we haven't done this yet with Vista, I'm going to challenge us maybe to do this on our call on Monday, have a bring your pet to work on Zoom day. I know it'll be chaotic, but take 30 minutes. Have everybody bring their dog. I thought about bringing my puppy, Dory, in here, but we all decided that wasn't a good idea to have a 9-month-old golden doodle in here on the live stream. But plan it, encourage your team. And then, this is all for emotional support. We're all in this together. We're all here to help one another. And most importantly, what Vista lives by is to help your clients. So the more that you can help your team, you're there to help your clients. Client contact. So client contact is a KPI that Vista talks with all of their clients about. This is a non-negotiable for us. And client contact means regular, proactive, actual verbal communication with them. That does not mean email and text messages, even though that is great and you can do that. So we just want to make sure that it is of the utmost important right now that you are proactively calling your clients. You don't want them calling you to find out if you're still open or what's the status of their case. You want to make sure that you're talking to them. I would encourage Zoom meetings. If your paralegals and case managers aren't comfortable doing that, the attorney should at least do Zoom meetings with their clients. If they're willing to do that, I think some face-to-face interaction would be great for them at this time. I would also encourage you when you're talking to your clients that to be really listening. That's one of the things that we talk about within the intake department is to really listen to your clients. So if you have a client that talks to you and tells you that their husband just lost their job because of this pandemic and that they're not sure how they're going to put groceries in their refrigerator, make sure that you have a way for your firm to escalate that to someone to see how your firm can help. If you're financially able to send them a $50 grocery gift card, I highly encourage you to do that, because not only is that something that just shows how much we care about them, it's just the right thing to do. So just make sure that you are actively listening to your clients when you're talking to them.
Amen. Yeah, we're going to jump into some kind of a technical area here with potential gaps in treatment, and Amanda's going to take it away again and talk a little bit about what that means and the importance of not letting your clients actually have a gap in treatment.
So this goes along kind of with the communication factor. That's one thing I didn't talk about a lot was the documentation. So even when you're making those notes in your case management system about these conversations you're having, make sure that if you didn't have lengthy notes in your case management system before, now's the time to make sure that we aren't miscommunicating anything to anyone. So the gap in treatment is something that, again, depending on where our clients are, some are more concerned than others. I'll just give you Kentucky for an example. So a few weeks ago, our governor completely shut down all non-emergency procedures. So guess what? That means physical therapy. That means chiropractor clinics. He even called out chiropractors on a newscast saying that this means you too. So if it's not happening in your area yet, you need to think about that. And even if your providers aren't closing just yet, your clients are going to become less and less comfortable going to their doctor's office. I would encourage you to make sure that you're being proactive and talking to the medical providers, especially any that you have a great relationship with, about how do they plan on treating your clients throughout this situation. Are they going to send them home with a packet of information about how to do physical therapy at home? Are they going to educate them on how to have telecommunication with them? My mom is actually having her first FaceTime meeting next week with one of her doctors, and I had to walk her through, even though she knows how to use FaceTime. It just made her nervous to know that she was going to be talking to her nurse practitioner. So making sure that you're talking to your clients and being proactive about that. Even if it's not happening right now, talk to them and explain to them what is going on. Another thing that I didn't even list on this, one of the firms that was on the Wind Down Wednesday with me, she had a spreadsheet created for her team to work off of right now, and it listed their top providers, and it was a live document, so her team could put notes in. So if it said, if this physical therapy office used to be open Monday through Friday, they were updating each other as soon as someone talked to someone at the office, if they changed their hours to Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, just to make sure, especially on the providers that we typically, our clients typically see, we want to make sure that we are trying to get them, if their offices are still open, that you're getting them into medical treatment as much as you can.
And I think it goes without saying, all of this is to be done because if there are generally gaps in treatment when a non-pandemic time, the insurance companies can say, obviously, the issues weren't that big because you didn't go to treatment. I think that it just makes it a little bit more complicated when they're not physically going to a pain management or chiro or to get injections or whatever it is. So this is extremely, extremely important. So when the insurance company doesn't say, hey, during this time you didn't get treatment, we can say, look, here are the pictures, here's the documentation, here's the regime. All those things, again, as Amanda said, are being proactive, and that's what we believe you should be. Fall on the side of doing more than doing less and hope it all works out. So.
Yeah, so some of the things that even my own clients, and I didn't really touch on this, I started in the personal injury law firm whenever I was 17 years old. So I've been in and out of law firms for a long time. And one of the things that I learned from the firm that I worked at was to make sure that we did have our clients documenting on their own. So that was like journaling. We sent them home when we signed their case up with a branded notepad so they could write down their thoughts. So now it's even more important to make sure that they are writing down, if they can't go to physical therapy, what are they doing at home? What exercises are they doing? All the way down to how much time are they spending with their physical therapy. It could be as simple as they used to take a couple of ibuprofen a day to help them with the pain, and now they've had to double up on their medication. I had one client tell me that they weren't concerned about the gap in treatment because they felt like that this was going to be some type of COVID-19 excuse 6 months from now. I can tell you from my own experience, one of my best friends is an insurance adjuster, and I would not want to have that argument with her. I think that you need to make sure that you're talking to your clients, because you don't want 6 months from now to have to call them and say, okay, for the months of March, April, and possibly May, can you explain to me how you were able to deal with your pain at home? So just be proactive. We included photo journaling. I think this is something that some people don't think about. If you do have someone at home that's maybe even had a surgery, make sure that they're taking pictures of that site, because if they aren't going to that regular daily, a few days a week physical therapy, I think that they may have some issues with that, and it'll be great information to be able to share with an adjuster. Last thing I want to touch on too, when you're journaling, make sure that you're talking, depending on the severity of the injury. If you have family members that are in the hospital right now from a car accident or any type of, not a car accident, a car crash, it wasn't an accident, it was a car crash. Those people that are in the hospital, their families can't see them right now. So and again, depending on the severity of the injury, those people may be in there for weeks or months, and right now their families can't see them of no fault of their own. So those are things, the emotional side of things too, we need to make sure they're writing down.
Let's talk about some of the big picture items. What would y'all tell people in terms of, let's say, rent?
Yeah, look, these are some individual firm decisions as where are you going to cut if you're going to cut. It was interesting when you showed the stats that people were generally not looking to cut payroll. They were looking at general expenses elsewhere, which again, kind of warms my heart. I think that's a compassionate thing to do here. We want to hold on to people. I had actually another of our consultants told me yesterday or day before that her parents have some rental property that is actually rented from some public companies, and they got an email that said, hey, we're not paying rent for the next 2 months. Well, that's pretty stern. But that's the kind of thing that I think we're going to see happening. So we're not here to advise you. You can go ahead and put the rest of those bullet points up if you would. We're not here to advise you guys exactly what you should, where you should cut back, but I hope you'll consider cutting back on other areas other than personnel. You know, we had some malpractice carriers say, hey, they're offering deferrals of payment, not forgiveness, but deferrals. And I think that's what we're going to see in some other areas, that people are willing to say, hey, we're going to pay you. We just can't right now. We'd rather keep our people, you know, employed. And all of these things become somewhat subjective and judgment calls. So it's a little bit hard for us to blanketly say, hey, this is what you should do. So I'm trying to give you some fairly big categories of where to look and where to save some money, assuming that your business is down. I do want to say this, even though you're not getting the calls possibly today, you had a set of cases in your pipeline. You know, going back to the 2 ways to grow your business, get more cases or add value, you really should be zooming in on adding value to the cases that are under your roof today. If you've got some time because you're not getting new cases and you're not having to do a lot of that initial work, please spend the time on digging into those cases and adding value. But also on the expense side, where do you cut? You got to look hard at everything. Case expenses are pretty hard to cut. Amanda, do you have anything specific on that you wanted to say?
I just wanted to say, and this would be not even just in the pandemic. I mean, there are some folks that, you know, maybe pay their providers a little bit slower on different things. You know, they have team members that they have to continue to pay as well to keep their doors open. So I would just encourage you, even though that might be your gut instinct is I'm just not going to pay those providers as timely as I should. I would strongly encourage you to keep those relationships the best that you can, because we don't want, even though everyone's going through this same crisis right now, we just don't want to taint any relationships. So just be careful if that is kind of your gut instinct, is just to stop paying some of those providers and things like that. But, you know, case expenses, I think it's really important, like as you're requesting medical records and things like that. This goes back to that whole spreadsheet. If you've got providers that aren't open and you're sending a request for them to send you records, and they may still send you invoices for those kind of things. So you just got to be really mindful about every dollar that's being spent right now, because you know, if they weren't before, you need to make sure that you're communicating that with your team members right now, just to make sure, you know, maybe we don't need to spend $1,000 on that IME right this second. If there are things that we can do to maybe talk to the adjusters and things like that to hopefully move those cases and not have to send people out for different exams. Right now, it goes back to that whole communication factor to help us hopefully save on some of those case expenses. Okay.
So what about employees?
Well, look, I'll say this and quickly. I want to make sure we have time to hit everything we want to. I think it's the of last resort that all of us will furlough team members, which is the proper word to use. It's not layoffs or firing or whatever, it's furloughing. Who may we have to do that to? And I think that is, again, going to vary from firm to firm, as you know, who are the most essential to keep your firm operational. There's lots of the other side of the government programs, rather than helping businesses, are extended unemployment benefits and that kind of thing. And with the stimulus package, you know, part of it's to be used to keep people on board, even if they aren't busy. We've had some clients that have, and very few that have actually gone through an early furlough. And if they get stimulus money, they've got to bring those people back, because it depends on maintaining a certain amount of your employees. So we're not encouraging this. I mean, it's kind of a last resort, but I think we all know that if it gets so tight that it's going to risk the business, we are going to have to look at slimming down our teams.
And being honest with your team members about this too. I think that's where, you know, some people are, you know, going to work one day and then by Monday they're being laid off. I mean, if this is truly something that you may have to think about in the next few weeks, I think honesty is your best bet.
Agreed.
Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about the impacts on some of the different types of law. I think this will be interesting. So in general, there's some categories that are going up, like employment law, both representing the employees and the employers. They're in general getting a bump in, excuse me, pardon me. They're getting kind of a bump in people reaching out to them. Estate work, bankruptcy has some potential to come up. Social Security, disability. We've seen that a lot in previous recessions, and I'm definitely hearing it already. In fact, one of my Social Security law firm clients said they had the best week in terms of intakes in the history of the firm. The firm's been around for 50 years. There's a lot of people with health issues. So when they're being let go by their employers or saying, you know what, I'm not going to try and get another job. I've been struggling to maintain the one I have. And so I'm going to go apply for benefits at this time. Workers' comp and personal injury has the potential, you know, to definitely be cooler on the intake side. I mean, there's less people on the road now than ever, right, in terms of car wrecks. But I don't, we'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute. I don't think I would say, okay, then let's stop advertising. In recessions, the studies show it's an opportunity that to keep your market share or even grow your market share. And the studies have shown the companies that, you know, stopped advertising during recessions usually lost market share to the ones who kept going. But I'm going to show you some interesting stuff on all of these categories in just a second. In fact, here we go, workers' comp. So what we're looking at here, this is a Google report, Google Trends, in terms of overall searching on the internet on topics related to workers' comp. How is it going? Look, so this is like a 90-day view. It's trending downward, but not dramatically. I can see the slight downward, but not dramatic, because if you're doing workers' comp, don't freak out. Similarly, for personal injury law, I do see a slight downward trend, but it's not like it's in the toilet. So I would still maintain steady as she goes. And interestingly, when we looked up wrongful death categories, there's actually a slight upward trend. So we could explore that some more, you know, what are the implications of that. Here's Social Security disability. Now in this case, we actually did a 5-year view. Look at it spike, you know, off the charts. Going to a 90-day view like we are with everybody else, you can clearly see that starting in March, people interested in the topic of Social Security is significantly, dramatically going upward.
I think that's an interesting point too, Nathan. You know, Social Security Disability has been doing online hearings for years, and they have their whole application online. So I think that it will, I don't think that they're going to see as big of a hiccup as some of the other law types, just because I think that they were already doing so much online.
Yeah, but I think beyond that, I think the recession impacts, I think you're going to see an increase in it. Remember on our survey, some people were more optimistic. I think you're seeing a reflection of that there. Also, one of my other clients told me that their local Social Security office is closed, you know, because they're closing offices. And so they're getting more people reaching out to them to help them apply because, you know, the firm's easier to work with than the Social Security Administration itself. So here's an interesting one. Let's see next one. Then we looked coronavirus lawyer. I'm not even entirely sure how that's going to play out. We're not sure if these are businesses looking or individuals, but we said, let's just see if this is a thing now. And starting in March, it started to become a thing. Now, interestingly, it peaked and it's kind of trending down, but it's something we can kind of keep our eye on as we move forward. I want to talk about the categories of marketing just in general. Let's start with the internet. So internet usage in general is up. You know, we saw here's Forbes saying 70%, and it's not just people watching Netflix or something like that. Internet usage is generally up. So if we're going to take advantage of it, we're going to suggest to you a couple of ways. Organically, if you have on your website, not already done this, have like a pop-up message. You can word it different ways, but as soon as they go there, they know you're open for business and you can help them without them having to leave their homes. If you are not yet, you know, doing something like paid search and you are in one of those areas where you're hoping to gain market share, it's hard to beat paid search because where people are searching, that's what comes up at the very top. And we can have whole conversations about how to utilize paid search. I want to also talk for a second about social media, because definitely people are on Facebook and social media like crazy. I don't know, at our agency, what we recommend is that the social media platforms like Facebook and LinkedIn, those are longer term plays. So if you were trying to raise awareness of something, let's say like, hey, you're looking for a coronavirus lawyer, what is that? You know, should even be talking to a lawyer about that. Those would make sense where you do this kind of longer term strategy with the social media, because they're not there to like hire a lawyer, right? They're there to interact with their friends and all that. And so if you just say, call me, you know, for your car wrecks or even your disability appointments, that's not a good strategy for social media platforms. That's a good strategy for things like paid search or pay-per-click in digital, but not social media. Are you like looking for people who are looking for you right now, or you need to do some education first? What about outdoors? So we've got less people on the roads than ever. It's an opportunity for you to go in and negotiate, you know, more for your money. There was a certain amount of impressions that were anticipated when you bought those billboards. And so if you ask them, can we extend it? You know, we made a certain amount of commitment for the money. Can we have more to make up for it? You know, you're probably going to find them receptive to that. Television is really interesting right now. So ratings are up. You know, more people are watching television. It's not just streaming like Netflix, and it's not even just the news. While they're at home and they're spending so much time there, ordinary stuff, you know, the Judge Judy's and, you know, even late night shows, people are just watching more television in general. So there's an opportunity for you to be seen more. The other thing that's kind of interesting is that while viewership is up, the advertisers are down. So legal is a category where we think you ought to be steady as she goes, you know, but if you're a restaurant or some kind of tourism based or, you know, maybe, you know, home remodeling, you know, maybe that's just at a standstill right now. So there's less advertisers. So there's an opportunity to go in there and try and negotiate bonus spots. Now I've heard some people talking about, let's go in and renegotiate rates. We would actually recommend to you, don't do that, because if you, let's say it was a $50 spot and you go in there and you hardball them and you get it down to 25. Well, as soon as this thing starts ending and demand starts picking up, you're not going to clear. So a way to kind of achieve that effect without actually screwing up your schedule is to ask for bonus. You know, those unsold spots, can you get more of those? I'm sorry, I want to say one last thing in terms of what to do on television in terms of the messaging itself. We'd recommend take your commercials and put on some messages right now that you're open and that they don't have to leave their home to come talk to you. One way to do this effectively, this is an example of what we did with the commercial, is instead of re-editing all your spots, they call it a super as in superimpose, like to create graphics that are just kind of layered on. That's an inexpensive edit that you can get done really fast. That's what we did for our clients in round one. Now we're starting to talk about, should we have specialized, more detailed, you know, commercials, maybe even shot over Zoom, something like that, if you want to have a more elaborate message.
Have you seen anyone changing any of their messaging to being a thank you to first responders and things like that, along with open?
Absolutely, that would be a great phase 2 message, especially if you're in one of those categories like personal injury where you're trying to get, you know, market share. This is a great, what we call branding opportunity for people to think you are great. So it could be partially educational, you know, how do you not get infected? It could be thank yous, you know, it would be a great time not to say something other than just, you know, hey, you're in a car wreck, call me to get you some money. Thank you for bringing that up, Amanda.
Somebody else just asked an interesting question too about their new client calls have dropped in Social Security and disability law. And in fact, today they have not had one new client call. So how should they let them know that they are open?
Oh, well, exactly what we're talking about. I think if you're doing television, you ought to have graphics on there right away. And on your digital platforms, you ought to change the messaging there to make it very clear that you're open and you're helping people.
No, absolutely. And we would say from an operational standpoint, you know, we don't consider ourselves marketing experts, but part of our operational consulting gets into the client experience cycle and reaching back to clients that are in your database. You know, an email blast to everyone that says just that: we're open. You know, we're here. This is how you contact it. You can't make it too easy for them to contact you for a service that they're looking for. So, agree with that.
All right, Tim, everybody wants to know, what do you think about the bill?
Okay, it's really interesting. I think I've got 2 minutes to cover the bill before we wanted to take some questions. So I'm going to move really, really fast here. But in the essence of time, will you bring all those bullet points up, Doug, for me? I think I'm going to take them in reverse order because, whoop, go back one. Yeah, a shameless plug for the Vista Consulting public Facebook page. If you search for that, if you're on Facebook and search for that, please do and ask to become a member, and we will get you in there. There's a tremendous amount of information, most of which has to do, well, not most of it, I would say 60% has to do with the stimulus package or the CARES Act. So what I'm not going to cover in the next 3 or 4 minutes, you might be able to find more data there. The other thing, quickly, communication with your team. Let your team know that you are reaching out to the SBA and the government and doing everything that you can to keep everyone employed. Again, this is a cultural thing, just trying to let everybody know that the business owners are very, very interested in their team, because that's what this is about. Most of the stimulus package is circling around the payroll protection loan program, which is just that, trying to encourage owners to keep their team employed. One of the incentives that the stimulus package, it's commonly known as the stimulus package, it's the CARES Act, is a potential deferment of payroll taxes and a payroll tax credit, which is going to come a little bit down the road as you keep people employed that may not have actual real work to do. And we have to be careful here in that if you take advantage of some of these options, it may not allow you to take advantage of some of the loans. So I'm not going to go into that in a lot of detail, but I will say that if you and your firm are not using a third-party payroll service, and I'm going to name a few, there's Paychex, there's ADP, our national, our local, we have a good one here in Baton Rouge called HR Solutions. If you're not using those third-party payroll providers, please do, because there's going to be some very complicated computations that need to be made in your payroll down the road. So if you're not using them, please contact them. All right, I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes just talking about the loan options that are out there today that surround the stimulus package or the CARES Act. There is a loan that SBA backs called the EDIL loan, and I wrote it down somewhere, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. This loan is one that is backed by the SBA. It was actually in place pre-pandemic, which means that you could go and apply for it yesterday. It's a very simplified application on the SBA site. This particular loan, you can use the money for any, basically, again, I'm going to use some broad terms here, you got to get into detail here, but basically any expense that was caused by the pandemic. There's also the potential in the EDIL loan to get a $10,000 advance, whether or not, it's interesting here, whether or not you are actually accepted to receive that loan. If you get the advance, you don't have to pay it back. It becomes a grant. So we are advising all of our clients to apply for that EDIL loan, whether or not you are awarded the loan, or if you get the loan, you may not even decide not to take the loan, but you could still get the advance. That sounds really cool. If you then go to the actual loan that was created, or the potential loan that was created by the CARES Act, called the Payroll Protection Plan, we call it the PPP, then that particular loan is a forgivable loan. But you have to apply through your financial institution to the SBA, who is going to guarantee this. So if you haven't contacted your financial institution and asked about this, I would highly encourage you to do that sooner than later. The amount of the award for this loan is, again, I'm going to use a broad term, basically 2.5 times of your average last 3 years payroll. So depending on what that is, that could be your loan award. And if you use it properly, which is going to be a tracking, an accounting tracking issue, then that loan can be forgiven. So again, I know that's extremely high level and very quick on these stimulus package loans. If you have specific questions for me, I'll be happy to try to answer those. You can email me. We're going to put a slide up here again, but I encourage you to go to that Facebook page, because there's a lot of information coming from a lot of different sources that may answer some of your questions. And I know we've got about 5 minutes or so left for any other questions, and I want to be respectful of you guys' time. So I hope I hit enough for you to know that you should be looking into this. Highly encourage everyone listening, if you're the business owner, please look into both of those loans. The acronyms again, EDIL and PPP. So I'll then stop and we'll go from there. And here's our contact info.
Great. Yeah, so we've now reached a question and answer session. So just as a reminder, everyone, you can still submit questions either through the chat or clicking on the Q&A button. We have one other question, which is, how do you track productivity if team members work from home?
I'll take that one. Again, Vista's been doing this, with our team has been working from home for years, and we have a very simplified tracking method, and it all has to do with output, because unless you put some very specific software on people's computers to know when they're sitting in front of their computers, it's difficult to tell, but what the inputs are. But quite honestly, we're not that interested in inputs. We're interested in what kind of value are we bringing to our clients. And Vista, I'll tell you, Vista's KPIs, they're very, very simple. Are our clients happy? Can the individual consultant tell me as the business owner that they are doing everything they can and they feel like that they are pushing their projects along as quickly as they can? And that's combined with, is the client happy? Those are 2 KPIs, and both of them are subjective, if you can tell. But the third one is very objective, which is the client paying their bill? So, that tells us those 3 things. If the client's happy, our consultants are confident within themselves, and they can tell me that they're pushing their projects, and the client is happy enough to pay us on a consistent basis, then we think we're doing a great job. We've talked to people who do put specific software to see, hey, is my team in front of their computer and doing what they can do? I don't know about you guys, but I can stare at a screen and look busy as hell and not be doing very much. So
that's a good point too. I mean, you can't, from our opinion, again, someone that works from home, and Tim does trust us, and if it was up to Tim, we would advise every law firm that they can work from home. There are some positions it is harder to work from home, and there are programs that you can place on your computers and things like that. But Vista helps build different dashboard reports for law firms to help show them which of their clients have been contacted in the last 30 days, how many demands has each individual team member put out during the time frame. So when we're looking at those things, I myself, I could probably talk circles around some other team members that I used to work with. I could get those same calls accomplished within a certain amount of time that might have taken Susie, my neighbor, 2 or 3 more hours to do. Does that mean that she's working harder than I am? Amanda
just said she talks a lot.
I didn't use all of my words today, Tim. You'll be proud of me. I saved all my words for you all.
Yeah.
All right, great. That looks like we're just out of time. And thank you to everyone for attending today's webcast. If you have other questions, you can contact any one of us directly with the contact information on the screen. You will receive a follow-up email within 48 hours with a link to view the recording of today's webinar. And on behalf of everyone here at Firmidable and our friends at Vista Consulting, thank you for joining us today. Unfortunately, we will not be validating parking. So stay safe out there and go get some great new clients today.
Hey, Tim, didn't you have something to say really quick? Happy birthday.
Oh, yes, I do. Thank you so much, Amanda. My mom is going to be watching this this recording, and today is her 94th birthday. So happy birthday, Mother. I love you to death. And we will, I thank you for reminding me, Amanda. That's pretty cool.
Happy birthday to Tim's mom.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
All right.
Bye, guys. Thank you.